morning and a very warm welcome to all of you. Please, there are still some seats possibly at the table. We are going to start now, and I will hand over for short technical introductions to Jan.
I will speak up but you will need to put on your headsets. Please take a seat at the table or put on the headsets. It's really important. Channel 0, which allows you to hear what we speak about. So the whole session is about using the headsets. If you want to speak, you have to press the red button. Make sure press on the machine here the button that turns it to red, right? And we have 2 seats empty for the fishbowl, and I'll explain later how this works. Annette.
Yeah, we are gathered here today to discuss how we all can contribute to a healthy information ecosystem and countering disinformation. This session is co-hosted by GIZ and Deutsche Welle, Akademie, DWA. Both organizations implement projects in various regions, such as West Africa, Latin America, Moldova, and we are very proud to bring those voices to the discussion today. My name is Annette Mummert. I'm the Director of Governance and Conflict Division at the Sectoral Department at GIZ. And I would like to introduce also my colleague. We are co-moderating here, Jan Lupinski. He is head of the Department Policy and Learning at W Academy. Before we proceed, or while we proceed, I would like also the audience to add their point to the poster at the entrance, if not done yet. We are trying to make it a little bit interactive. We will look at this later on during the session. Now I hand over to Jan.
Yes, I'm really delighted that we can discuss information integrity today. And you could say, well, information integrity and the issue of misinformation, people passing on wrong information without being aware of it, and disinformation, people passing on deliberately false information. And also the issue of hate speech has always been around in history. So why do we actually discuss it today? And I'd like to give you 3 reasons why I think this is timely. The first reason being artificial intelligence has been around for a while, but we've seen massive advancements in the past 2 years. Suddenly, professionals working with text see themselves possibly being replaced. We see all kinds of technological opportunities, but also threats, and also the threat or the potential of this artificial intelligence amplifying the distortion of information integrity in one way or another. And the experts discuss how big this will be. But the second reason why I think it is timely to discuss this are the US elections. We've seen an amazing political comeback by a person who has instrumentalized or redefined the term fake news as a political battle tool, in insisting or making the differentiation between what I think and what the rest of the world thinks, independently of facts, independently of a common reality. This definitely is a threat, and the term fake news is used against those who professionally deal with the search for truth and the facts, the journalists and the scientists. So this is my second reason, and it's not about Donald Trump. It is about all the authoritarian tendencies we see worldwide. And we'll hear more from the panelists in a minute. My third reason for this being a timely discussion is a positive one. I had the privilege to be in New York in September for the United Nations General Assembly, and the Pact for the Future was agreed upon by 193 member states. And we saw its annex, the Global Digital Compact, which has a whole section on information integrity, and I can only advise you to read it. After a whole year or longer of negotiations, we see a whole segment on what information integrity means, and we see an explicit mention of media, of diverse and resilient information ecosystems, of independent public media. We see the importance of access and dissemination of independent, fact-based, timely, targeted, science-based information. The importance of of media literacy is mentioned, the importance of dealing with good information systems in situations of crisis is mentioned. So my third reason is a positive one for this discussion, because we know and we have agreed upon where we want to go as humanity. So this is the big chance. We see the massive challenges on the one hand, and we also have defined where we want to go. So this is timely to discuss this today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to welcome our experts who bring different perspectives and in-depth expertise to this round, from public policy, international organizations, civil society, and journalism, and from regions such as Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. I would like to warmly welcome Mrs. Aisha Dabo, co-founder of Africtivist and member of the TikTok Sub-Saharan African Safety Advisory Council. Michelle Nogales Cardozo, CEO of Muiwazo in Bolivia. Mrs. Ana Revenko, Director of Center for Strategic Communications and Combating Disinformation in Moldova, and former Minister of Interior in Moldova. And finally, Mr. Guilherme Canela de Sousa, Chief of Freedom of Expression and Safety of Journalists at UNESCO. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jan.
Well, this is just to prepare you. I'd just like to prepare you for this session format. Annette will be running a mini podium discussion with the panelists in a minute, and then in the next step we'll do what they call a fishbowl, although it's not really the setting for it. We have reserved 2 seats here, and we will invite you later to join into the discussion. So not by questioning, but by actually sitting here and discussing for a while and then leaving the chairs. I'll explain this again in a minute. But yeah, be reminded that we need to work through this audio system, which makes it a bit formal, but also quite intense, because I think we can hear each other well. So you will be invited, but first over to you, Annette, for the first round of discussion with the panelists.
Yeah, each speaker has now 2 minutes to provide an answer, and 2 minutes are not very long. So, the introductory question is, looking at your own context, what is the most prominent challenge you are currently dealing with when it comes to the spread of disinformation? Aisha.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. The most pressing challenges we are dealing with right now is disinformation being used for various purposes. To further societal division that exists in terms of ethnicity, in terms of social class, and this could be done by both state and non-state actors. We have disinformation being manipulated to, entice violence, to extend foreign influence, like we've seen by foreign people who are not from the African continent operating in the Sahel region. We have also seen disinformation being used to undermine democratic processes and weaken democratic institutions. We've also seen that the disinformation actually has strong impact both on our democracies and on human life. And each of the regions on the continent actually has a type of disinformation being used to destabilize the countries or the region.
Thank you. And over to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Well, yes, it's a very short time, but I will try not to be reductionist in my answer because it's really complex. But in South America, Latin America, and especially in Bolivia, we have been struggling with the new spaces that disinformation had found to be spread, like WhatsApp or TikTok. You know, these channels have been really strong to threat our democracies, as Aisha said, but also to spread disinformation in other areas, like, health, like something on a daily life. And this is quite hard because disinformation is attacking the real everyday of people, you know, and not only affecting politics or economy, but also like the relationship that the people has with their families, their friends, you know, and this had led to polarization. And also we have found that we are not having enough efforts to counterback disinformation, because we have been focusing in only verify disinformation, but not only to work out with the audiences, you know, to work out with them and also to build the critic thoughts of audiences.
Thank you. Yes, then Anna, please.
Good morning. Will it help? Okay, I would like to touch upon three aspects of the challenges. First is lack of consensus, what disinformation is. And I don't mean the definition. I am speaking about understanding the complexity of the Russian machine. How does it work in the information space and the depth of the harm it brings? Because many people think automatically of fake news when they hear the word disinformation. But the truth is that just fake news, they're not so dangerous, because Russian disinformation consists mainly of spinning the truth, of exaggerating the problems, using only part of the context, part of the text, filling in the rest with the improbable or impossible things as certainties, exploiting the concerns and aspirations of people. And in this case, it's very difficult to counter it, because it is not just about showing that it's fake. It is not just about refuting the fake. It is not just a situation to be treated as it was just factual error, right? So first of all, we must admit that we have a common problem. And we have to start putting it on the table. We have to start discussing, we have to start debating, we have to start the conversation. This is missing. Instead, we're going around trying to solve the situation as it is just a mere factual error. What we're seeing that instead, both politicians and opinion leaders and researchers, including and civil society and media, unfortunately, they run away from these challenges, while Russian manipulation continues to be the only voice heard in the information space. Shortly, second big problem, as we think, and I do hope this will also inspire the discussions, is deficient coordination between the various authorities and state institutions, and the lack of coordinated approach to countering, not combating, but countering this Russian machine working in information space. And last is lack of consistency when it comes to addressing certain topics, subjects that are under the attack by Russia, and not only within the borders of the Republic of Moldova. We are talking about a common information space that is being consumed by people in the democratic world. I'll stop here.
Thank you. And Mr. Guillaume, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for GIZ and Deutsche Welle Academy for this invitation. Let me first share with you a personal story. I have no idea what a fishbowl strategy, whatever it was. So last night I had a nightmare that I was a fish, and more precisely Dory. And the thing is that I completely in this nightmare forget what I needed to tell you today. So I wake up this morning and say, oh my God. So I hope this is not going to happen in the actual fishbowl story here. But going to the question, I think the biggest challenge we have is a challenge of reshaping the governance of the system. But since this is too complex to explain in 2 minutes or less, there is one particular thing that we need to focus on, this reshaping of the governance, that is the lack of transparency on what is going on. So we are all trying to discuss strategies, smaller ones or bigger ones, activities, policies, reshaping the legal framework. In other words, we are trying to do policy, but without the evidence to do evidence-based policy. And we don't have the evidence in the amounts and complexity and the coherence we need, because there is a huge lack of transparency in the system. Since most of the data is on the hands of the companies, the tech companies, or on the heads of governments that are not very much transparent, we still face this huge challenge. We all agree that we need to counter mis or disinformation. Most all of us agree that we need to reshape the governance system. We all agree, as Jan said a few weeks ago in the UN, that we need to go for information integrity, but the substance of moving ahead depends of more transparency on the system. So this is a kind of a catch-22, because the system itself, it's about having more transparency, but if we don't have more transparency, we policymakers like in the UN, we can't actually suggest a very coherent way forward. So I would say for me, if I need to pick one thing, there are others, is that we still need to improve a lot the transparency of the system. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Jan.
Yeah, I tried to take a look at the poster, so bear with me, but my colleagues will assist me in analyzing this. Yes, that's interesting. So we have a quadrant that is really strong. So we have a majority vote for very high, how significant, so we all consider the threat of disinformation very significant, and we all think far too little is being done. Can I ask those who have marked, is there anybody who marked more than enough, or roughly more than enough? Would anybody dare to explain, or the outliers? I'd be interested in them. Is there somebody who can explain why they put their dots in the middle, or rather below the line here? It would be interesting just to hear. Is there anybody who dares to speak up? If not, I can give you an argument that explains this. If you look at the latest reports from the Oxford Reuters Institutes on the news and media, you will find that some scientists, quite strong, well-reputed scientists, say that maybe the problem of disinformation is over-amplified by some journalists, some media, and some politicians, and that we should maybe also look at other issues like the problems of the politicians, like also the classic media. Of course, the platforms and transparency is a big issue, but then also there are classic media like Fox News that somehow are partisan media. Just to give you an idea why one could be on the other side, as if nobody dares to make that point. But obviously, it does make sense to say we have a huge problem and not enough is being done. Right, so I'll walk back, and now I'll encourage you then to also join the discussion, because we have 2 seats. I've tried to be a good example. I'm moving around the room, although this is a bit awkward. If you want to join in the discussion, there are 2 seats next to Annette and me, and you can come, make a statement, and then leave again, and leave the room to others, for others to express themselves. And this is your chance to directly engage with the panel. I'll move over so you can think about whether you have something to say. Thanks. Okay, what else can I say to structure this? I would like to thank the panelists for being really timely in 2 minutes. That was really helpful, but I really liked all your points. And I think this is the way I want to structure the discussion. So I have this, as a moderator, you can be impolite, as you know. I will show this to you if you get too long. This is not that I don't like what you say, it's just that I want us to really engage in a discussion. And after having heard you, I think maybe it's what they call a wicked problem, disinformation. So you always jump from one dimension to the next, and you confound, and you have associations everywhere. So maybe let's structure the discussion in that way, that we start by discussing maybe the political and governance issues as you have introduced them. Then we move over to the platforms, and then we come back to the audiences and the people themselves, and maybe the classic media also, if that makes sense. So let's try to discipline ourselves in the short time that we have. And so if anybody has something to say on politics and governance, please join us and sit here. You get the chance to speak. And meanwhile, I'll ask the others. Can I ask you, Aisha? I know in Europe and Northern America, everybody says we need governance, we need new laws. But does governance in Africa work? In Senegal, would governance of new laws against disinformation, would that work?
In Senegal, we already have the laws that are in existence. The previous government actually was insisting on having a new law on regulating social media. Why we didn't need that? Because we already have laws that exist and that have inspired other countries. The issue on the continent is the fact that laws are being passed with the pretext that they're fighting disinformation while it's being used to silence dissent, to prevent freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of opinion. That's where the problem is. And that's why we advocate, and we do actually, when the government we have in front of us is open, we do call for discussions. When there is a bill, to discuss and see how can we balance between regulation and fundamental freedoms. And that's a challenge.
Yeah,
But from 2010, 2011 to today, most laws that have been passed on cybersecurity, cybercriminality, and everything that has to do with the cyberspace are being used, or even laws on terrorism are being used actually to hamper on basic freedoms.
Yeah. Can I ask Michelle on this as well to comment, and then I'll introduce you? Okay.
Sure. Well, in Bolivia, it's quite hard because we are one of the few countries that don't have laws about social media or internet or security, digital security. So it's very harsh for us because, as Aisha said, you know, in the global south, many of these laws are used to, suppress freedom of speech, and also are used for the governments as a weapon against citizens. And we have it quite hard because it's not like Bolivia, it's not like the European Union that can sit on the same table with these big corporations to say, stop doing this, you know, they don't even look at us, you know, we don't exist for these big corporations. So that is quite hard for us because if we could go as a big bloc, like a global South bloc, you know, against them, maybe something could work out. But I don't know, these big enterprises don't even have an office in Bolivia, so it's quite hard for us in that matter.
Thank you very much. I'll let you speak. Please introduce yourself, but let me tell the others there's one seat available. So if you want to join in, please sit opposite me here. Yeah, Pierre, please come.
Yeah, just trying to help you out because no one was up here.
That's too kind,
thanks. My name is Chris Painter. Among other things, I've been helping run the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, but I'm kind of speaking more in my capacity as a longtime former U.S. official and diplomat dealing with cyber issues and cyber crime and cybersecurity. So I want to just talk about the governance issue and also make a reference to what you said about the law issue. And, you know, many countries, democratic countries, you don't want the government deciding what's true or not true, and so that's one of the problems. And even in the cybercrime negotiations, which just recently concluded, certainly some states, Russia in particular, wanted to criminalize content, wanted to criminalize opinions, and they didn't succeed in that. There's some controversy about the treaty, but they didn't succeed in that basic thing. So then you get to transparency. How can you ensure transparency? But in the U.S., and I suspect other places too, one of the problems, and we saw this in the last election, is those people who were instrumental in pointing out transparency. Just things like, is a post of foreign origin? Is a post generated by AI? Even that was so politicized in the U.S. that the people who had done that in the past, including CISA, the DHS, I think were kind of cowed not to do it as aggressively as they did before. And so if you have a system where the people doing this don't feel they can even provide the transparency because that becomes such a political issue, how do you reach that governance?
Thanks very much indeed. If Anna or Guillaume, you want to respond to this, don't hesitate.
Thank you. I think that we need to be, the challenge is how we frame the discussion. When we are discussing disinformation or misinformation or even hate speech, there is this temptation to think that the governance of the system is about the content. This is a wrong approach. The governance of the system should be about the processes. And there are ways of regulating, self-regulating, so it's a mixed approach of things that require governments, but things that require a whole of society approach. So there are ways of reshaping the governance while protecting freedom of expression. Actually, this should be the goal of any governance system. The issue that sometimes we get it wrong is that the freedom of expression is being protected by the lack of governance, and this is wrong. We are seeing freedom of expression to be attacked because women are being attacked all the time, so then they have a chilling effect in their own speech. So freedom of expression is the right to impart, but is also the right to seek and receive. So if the entire system is flooded with disinformation, hate speech, and misinformation, this basic right is being attacked. So it's easy to say, but it's not easy to do. So that's why the huge challenge we have is to reshape the governance, not about the content, but about the processes.
Thank you very much. Anna.
You know, regulate is the easiest. This is exactly what the adversary would want. This is exactly how Russia is intervening. Various laws limiting, in fact, the development of an open democratic society. So I think that in order to answer the question that you raised, we have to go back to the roots. What are the factors that are actually favoring the penetration of this information manipulation? And what are the targets? The targets clearly are the societal consensus on the key national interests, national common interest of a democratic world, the unity. And in our case, it's live in an open society where freedom of speech is actually the very foundation, and it's left untouched. At the same time, how can we keep that going when the Russian machinery is so aggressive? When we've done the mapping of these vulnerabilities, we end up coming that the level of trust in state institutions and between the citizens is very low. This appartenance towards the state of the Republic of Moldova or democratic world is also very low. How do you build that respect, trust, will in this case? Apart from this general governance, democratic governance principles, transparency, anti-corruption, and so on, we also have to think about how to intervene in case of when this very fabric of the society is being shaken. So in the center that I have the honor to lead, we have actually came to the conclusion that we have to prioritize strategic communication around national interests that reflect the security objectives of the country in order to build resilience of the society, to push back the Russian disinformation. The culture of security is low, the culture of democracy is low, so we need to go back to those roots. That's exactly what we have decided in the center in order to avoid being the Ministry of Truth, of being the one that says what is black and what is white, but really develop and maintain that culture of democracy and the culture of debate. And I can't agree more with William that it is far not enough for the state institution to strategize communication around national interests. It takes whole of the society. It takes NGOs, it takes media, and it's far more about putting back the fact-based discourse, public discourse. It's about educating. It's about those kind of news that actually enable continuous education of people to think in a democratic way.
Thank you very much for outlining this vision, both of you. Pierrick.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you to all the panelists. This is a great and very timely conversation. I'm Pierrick Judeau. I'm with the International Fund for Public Interest Media, which is the first global fund and international organization that helps sustain independent media by providing them with financial support. I think many of us have had the sense that we're fighting an unfair fight. Like, we know that lies spread faster than truth. We know, as it's been highlighted, that the balance of power between the big platforms and those that fight day to day in favor of information integrity is uneven. But I want to share kind of two things that give me a bit of hope, and I would love the panelists' reactions to see how we can amplify those things. The first, as was discussed, is around governance, and there's been quite a lot of progress in recent years, including given the leadership of the EU. But perhaps more importantly, we start to see that global South countries and actors are now shaping this much more than in the past. The fact that information integrity is being discussed as part of the G20 this year, for instance, I think is a major signal. And I think collectively we need to reflect on how we can foster more of that. The second point is, I think we're starting to acknowledge that this is also a resourcing question. We need more money into this system, into information integrity. If you look at the money that's going from OECD DAC countries, so all the big donor countries, it's basically 0.02% of all ODA, of all overseas development assistance. It hasn't moved in 15 years. And I think there's now a kind of recognition that more needs to be done in that regard and that there's a financial dimension to this. And so the fund, the International Fund that I work for, but also many others, are now helping to create structures that can channel some of this capital towards independent media, because we know that fighting back after fake news, propaganda has been issued doesn't work. We need, as Anna just said, to build the societal resilience to disinformation. And the only way we do that, I think it's now relatively well documented, is by having strong, local, trustworthy media organizations. And so I'd love your reflections as to how that interplay is playing in your different countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe the question is up to you, but maybe Anna, to get it a bit more focused on this, of course, the importance of more funds for media to build the culture and the processes you were talking about. It is key, but then there is also this whole industry of disinformation. It's not only the Russian industry, but there's also in Africa, we see, it being a market of disinformation professionals being used. And this is also something that we need to take a close look at, and where we need to invest more resources, as Pierre rightly says. If you have any thoughts on this, please come in. And there's a chair here next to me. If you have something to say, please come for a while and discuss with us.
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Patrick, just said, because I think that something, at least in the South America region, is missing, is that most media outlets, especially the big ones, but also like the ones that are coming up, we are not like working on developing the audiences or the community's skills, regarding to disinformation or misinformation also, We are really focused on, like you said, just putting away the fires. And something that we just saw is that we need to take this responsibility as media outlets, but also as journalists, because we journalists have to take the time to educate our communities, our audiences, and actually the media is not taking that time. It's not taking that as an important role as media outlets. So I think we need to give the example, give time to give this data, give this information, and also work it out with the audiences, because we cannot expect the audiences to just build it out, just be ready when we are not giving them the tools to be ready for that.
Thank you. Guillaume, and you're the next.
Just to add to that, in the Global Digital Compact and the Pact of the Future, many different areas, including this one, is now rethink as global public goods or global common goods. So in the idea that information is a public good in a simplified model, we are talking about the importance of empowering the demand for accurate and reliable information. So what she was mentioning, how we empower the people through education, media and information literacy, and so on. So this is super important, but not enough. We can't put only on the shoulders of the society some things that are related to trillion-dollar companies or governments that want to spread disinformation in an intended way, right? Then the other part of the equation is how we qualify the supply, so how we protect the media or the scientists or the artists, so all those that are producing inputs, reliable and accurate information into the system. And here, rethinking journalism as a public good is a very important and difficult topic, but necessary if we want to reshape the system. But only those two things are no longer, this was the model in the 20th century. We qualify the demand and we qualify the supply. If we don't rethink the transmission chain, so the digital ecosystem, we are not going to make it. So the governance is about these three things: the demand, the supply, and the digital ecosystem itself. Right?
Thank you very much. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mami Yassine Fall, and I am a technical advisor for GIZ regional project in Senegal, and yes, we are implementing for now in Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. And what we are doing there, I'm happy to see Aisha, who we are working with. And yes, what we are doing is really one of the aims of the project is to create this room for discussion between government, media, civil society, and social platforms to just, jointly develop some strategies to tackle this information. And one of the challenges is the content moderation, because as you may know it, in West Africa and in Africa in general, we have local languages. And it can be really difficult to moderate. And so what we are trying to do in this project is to establish a coalition between regional coalition with Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire and maybe other countries from ECOWAS, just to try to make them, have the strategies to see how to tackle this information and with the local context, because we are just facing some difficulties on the Sahel region, and so this is one of the main challenges, and we are trying to just make them partners together in order to face them. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much. Stay here. So we have another seat if you want to intervene. I'm deviating a bit from my plan because we're jumping from one to the next, as I expected. So we've touched a bit the governance issue. We've discussed the demand side, as Guillaume called it. But we need to discuss also the intermediaries, and this is what you do. And the issue of content moderation is something we should be discussing. And maybe we now take 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the issue of how to deal with the platforms. Based on what you said, maybe that makes sense. So if anybody of you has ideas on how to attack this part of the problem, please come and join us. Would you discuss from here?
Yes.
Please, go ahead. Introduce yourself if you can.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Carol Sharabati. I'm coming from Lebanon. I am an academic and a public sector reform consultant. We've worked on a solution called Dalil that's pitched here at Paris Peace Forum to address disinformation. And the approach we've been thinking about is, if you think about it from a rational perspective, for the political actor, it's much cheaper to lie than to say the truth. So we need to tackle this in a way. And there are two sides of one coin. There's the positive reward and there's the negative penalty. So on the negative penalty side, in Dalil, what we've done is kind of create a lens that will help the recipient of a message detect if this message is true or false using AI and other technologies. So this allows to discredit the source of the message. So the political actor who's disseminating a wrong message is gonna be hurt in a way, and you put a kind of a negative penalty on his communication. But I think also there is some thinking about the positive reward of sending a truthful or an objective message. And early on, I was talking with people in the environmental sector. For instance, if you work in debunking messages, you can get carbon offset points or rewards that can be monetized. So some positive reward can be created for fact-checking groups and fact-checking organizations. So this way, address the political actor who's disseminating the false message with the negative penalty and go towards positive rewards with the organizations that are debunking information. But to do all this, we need the technology, the capability, the tools. This is what we've been working on. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of capability also. You need GPUs and you need intelligent products to do that.
Thank you very much. I think the issue of positive and negative labeling, because we want, as Guillaume said, the quality to come through. In this flooding of dirt. We want maybe a labeling also or recognition, but maybe also shaming those who deliberately get it wrong. But this is not easy to if we don't understand the technology, if we don't have the transparency to actually advance in this. Any comments on this, Anna?
Yes, indeed. Debunking must remain in the arsenal of response tools. But debunking is reactive. Debunking comes at a stage when you don't know already how many have viewed and what was the effect already of that false, whatever, fake, and you are always running after the train. Building your strategy around debunking is, at least in our experience, by prioritizing on it. It means that you are actually too late in building the knowledge, in building the understanding, in building the resilience. Debunking doesn't build resilience. Debunking doesn't build the knowledge why this is a threat, what is under attack. Again, please don't get me wrong. I do believe that debunking must remain as part of the arsenal, but only if it is addressed in a classical declaration type of form. But building around it in a mass, in an ocean of disinformation and misinformation, and you can continue with all these words, will not build this resilience. That's why, once again, I'm coming back to, and based on the experience of the center that I lead, we have prioritized strategic communication around the national interest, building the resilience. This is what is the only way to push back the this interference. Imagine that if it is like a bowl, who puts the first water in the bowl is, will dominate the bowl. So our priority is to be proactive, is to anticipate what Russia is doing and anticipate its play and be the first to communicate and build the knowledge. So when the Russian narrative is coming, people already have the basic facts and are much more prepared to distinguish between one or the other. And that's why I said it's not only possible that this is being done only by the state institutions because of the trust, because Russia has been working on these things for decades. And it is an extensive ecosystem, not only digital platforms that now are a very important tool in their ecosystem, but traditional media. And since we are talking about the media a little bit earlier, we see that the traditional media is on the decline. And the alternative, so-called alternative media on the digital platforms is increasing. So the question is, how do we strategize on the topics that we agree all of us to communicate about? How do we engage those who are trustful in terms of sources of information? So what we did, for example, in our case, we have made public the key national interests that serve as pillars for communication for each and everyone. It's a concept approved by the parliament. It's a policy document that can serve as a reference document for any stakeholder, media, civil society organizations, academia, private sector, volunteers, and so on. So it's remember at the beginning I mentioned about lack of coordinated approach towards the key topics that are exploited by Russia. So this is what we want to make sure that we fill in, if you want, the information space in advance and always and consistent with that kind of knowledge information that is able to build that resilience and, like I said, push back the Russian FIMI. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add a small comment on, so there are two levels to address disinformation. There's the micro level through the governance, and there's the micro level through the tools and building the immunity of the individuals who receive the message. In the region where I come from, it's interesting, the comparison, which is the Middle East. Disinformation is coming in masses, and throughout the crisis, it's very hard to control this with governance, So the only way to address this is by building the immunity of the individuals in particular. And when you talk about individuals, it's people in millions. So this means you need to provide them with a kind of glasses or a lens that they put on. Any information that comes their way is flagged green or red, and they know how to think about it. So just open up the marking of this information, mark it as an information to be worried about or an information to be less worried about, and let the individual process and think about this. So a kind of an alerting lens that helps the citizen at individual level process the information.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm really excited that you show how broad and complex the issue is and how broad and complex our answer is. Nevertheless, I'm still waiting for somebody to comment on what the platforms should be doing. I'll ask Guillaume in a minute, but I'll first let you contribute.
Hi, my name is Josiah Hagan. I'm Field CTO for Trend Micro, Global Cybersecurity Leader. Just my perspective on building resilience in the digital ecosystem, I'll make the analog to malware. Right now, none of us would install and run a binary that's not signed. The Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, I think is a really positive development. If we sign human content and we use certificate authorities to publish stories, it's a lot easier to understand where they're coming from, build reputation, and just don't allow things that you don't want within your individual digital environment.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, that's really important that it does take the tools for trust. Yeah. But yeah, may I ask you, and then Aisha, you'll be next. What is content moderation part of the tool set that we need?
Thank you. Very briefly. Of course, content moderation, and as equally, and maybe even more important, content curation, that is the one done by default by the machines, are two essential elements of the processes that need to be, the governance should be reshaped. And in this case, a few elements that at least UNESCO is suggesting in our guidelines for the governance of digital platforms are: first, transparency about the process. This is really paramount. Second, not necessarily in this order, a full commitment with human rights, also for the companies in shaping this content moderation and content curation model. So these big techs don't become censors themselves, because it's about not the state to be a censor, but it's not about these companies to become censors of legitimate speech, right? Third, the companies need to publish human rights due diligence about the impact of their products, including their processes of content moderation and content curation. And the parenthesis, when you see they are engaging with independent regulatory authorities and elections, for instance, in an open and human rights-based way, it's having positive impacts in reducing disinformation, etc., during elections, right? And then finally, it's very important that they are committed in empowering the users. And this is related, for instance, as was mentioned on local languages, to really have those things in the languages of the countries they operate. Because one of the whistleblowers, and I finish with that, of one of these big companies, the documents that they released showed that one of the companies was 87% of their investment in content moderation was in English, while we have the amount of languages we speak in this planet. So, of course, this is not reasonable.
Yes, I can really recommend you take a look at the UNESCO guidebook on platform regulation, because it has been built over a long period of time with many stakeholders, and you really get guidance on what to think about this area. Aisha, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to speak on strategy that the lady from Lebanon mentioned, and Anna's contribution. And here, actually, Africtivist, which is a network of organizations and individuals on the continent, we are in 40 countries. And what we do is a I'll call it kind of a holistic approach to things. We include both the governance aspect and the tools aspect that the lady mentioned. Because as we all realize, if you continue debunking, it's like chasing a tail that never ends. So the proactive approach we go with is making sure that there is digital literacy and media literacy. We combine the two. We set up what we call innovation hubs, where you have young people who have been given the tools and the approach, who then go and raise awareness in communities and train people on how to identify the right information. First, digital hygiene is very important. There is basic cybersecurity, and then there is fight against disinformation. We have set up one in Benin, another one in Mauritania, and we're going to scale up from next year. We are going to add 6 more platforms. So this is, in a way, at a limited scale, but decentralizing the approach to make sure that the communities have the right tools or skills to be able to identify. And the next step we're going to include is community radios. There's so many radios on the continent, and the thing they lack most is content. So the content will be produced in national languages, and it will be broadcasted in community radios for people to be aware, to raise people awareness on critical thinking, because we definitely need the human aspect. Another thing we do is we provide trainings on fact-checking and digital investigation. And we are very happy that the CESTI, the journalism school at the University of Dakar, which is one of the major journalism schools on the continent, is considering having fact-checking as a curriculum of its own, separate from the standard training, which we welcome, because this is needed. And independent media, and this I will insist on, I don't want to recreate, but we all know the challenges that traditional media is facing. And even the digital media are facing now. So people are more relying on the information than get on social media. If we take the example of the situation that happened day before yesterday in Amsterdam regarding the Israeli fans, that's an example of social media or individuals correcting traditional media. So independent media is very important. You talked about tech companies. As an organization, we interact with tech companies because we know it's important. And of course, we have thousands and thousands of language on the continent, which makes it more challenging. But this is a discussion that if the tech company is willing, they have the funds actually to make sure that, content is moderated in at least the main languages that are spoken on the continent. They've done a lot compared to years back, but there's still more that needs to be done on that aspect. But the fact that they're open to discussion and interacting with civil society, for me, that's the first positive step.
Thank you very much indeed. I will let Michelle talk in a minute. This is your very last chance to come here and ask a question. This is the final element or round of the fishbowl. So if nobody comes, it will be Michelle, and then we will have another section that will be run by Annette in a minute.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jan. I will be real fast because I think there is something really important that we need to address. And it's like, yes, we have audiences and we have big tech companies, but in countries like Bolivia and many other countries in Latin America, we really need to work with journalists, because it's not like in Europe or other countries where that the journalists are really committed with saying everything, having different sources and having a lot of data. In Bolivia, even the big media are struggling with the financial stuff, and it's in Bolivia, it's compared that most of the government, a lot of levels of the government, use public money to finance media, journalists, and even content creators that will be loyal to the government. So how do we fight back against that, and many of journalists in Bolivia are also communitary journalists, so they have another spaces to educate themselves. So we really, really believe in informal education, and we really believe in many creative ways, imaginating ways to address the journalists in informal education, because there is no other chance to work it out. We really need to tackle in this middle point of the information process.
Thank you very much. Anna, I really like the fact that you said it's an arsenal of weapons. So fact-checking can be one element, training journalists or building their capacities and helping them create trustful media is another one. We talked about the platforms and the governments. Up to you now.
Yeah, a few things I would like to highlight from this year work in our election year. As you know, we had the presidential elections and the referendum, the constitutional referendum on accession to EU. So first pickups regarding cooperation with platforms. Of course, it's much better than previous years, but there is more room for proactiveness from these businesses. And I think at least three I would like to pick up. One of the preventative nature. And we are talking about monetized disinformation. I mean, after all, these are businesses, and we do expect from businesses to take due diligence exercises when it comes to entering transactions with legal or individual entities. This is first, and second, a proactive approach. And I think it was also mentioned by Guillermo, is that one of the to get engaged more in the awareness about the threats. We don't see sufficient awareness from these platforms. It will empower the consumers stay or navigate in a more safer environment, and that definitely must be done by engaging much more active with media, with NGOs, with civil society organizations, fact-checking networks, because this is the only way that to increase the awareness, constant awareness on the digital platforms. And third, more of a reactive, let me put, measure. We still see a scarce approach of platforms when it comes to intervening in case of sudden incidents. So linguistic calibration of the technologies in order to identify timely and then investigate the whole network is definitely necessary. At least in our case, we are seeing that the AI that is being used is far not sufficient to play a significant role in securing a more safe information space from their side.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for the discipline. I didn't use this, but this is my last sentence. I hand over to Annette.
Thank you very much. Yes, it has been an intense session, and let's try to summarize in 3 minutes, less. We have heard, for example, starting with the understanding the challenge. I think it was very interesting to see that it's not so easy. Fake news is not probably the issue, but this twisting, that what we heard. So it's really twisting, combining with emotions, that makes it really hard to counter. We heard that transparency is key, also transparency on the challenge. What are we talking about? And this is an essential instrument, yes, but also we heard about power imbalances, like in Bolivia. What is the power you have regarding the tech firms? So one I think important aspect is in terms of regulation, yes, how to bring the power and the market of disinformation really into confined areas. And then we heard that there are some good examples, or there are some like human rights due diligence, full commitment. So there are approaches. But one other aspect is the whole topic, like, what if you have weak and autocratic governments using this disinformation as an opportunity to instrumentalize, and how would you then be able to really, to come up with a strengthening society-state relations? And there we heard a lot of different instruments. One thing is really strengthening resilience and the whole of society approach, especially in autocratic context. We heard about the idea or to work on tools like labeling, positive, negative, strengthening the disinformation aspect. Priorities, that was also, I think, a very interesting comment to say we need to be, debunking is reactive, but we need to be proactive. And then again, it comes to a strategy, how to do it. And also what we also saw is that information integrity is a global public good. That means that no government, no state can act on its own, but to seek for alliances, to seek for common ground also within the UN system, and to support, because the tech firms are also acting globally, to support regulation of platforms and this matter. Yes, so bear with me, there are some probably very subjective insights here as a summary, and I would like to thank the speakers and the audience alike for this very interesting session. And yeah, GIZ and WDWA, we are committed to further work on this topic also together. And yeah, so wish you all a good day. And yeah, all the best.
Thank you.